Well, we're back with another episode of Conversations and Connections, the official podcast of the Family Crisis Center of East Texas. I'm Stuart Burson, the Prevention Coordinator for the agency, and it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we've done podcasts before where we've talked to some of our advocates and our counselors about domestic violence and its effect on the victims, on the families, and the community, and things like that. But one of the things I really wanted to do, which I think I don't know how unique it is, but here at the Family Crisis Center, of course, we have a prevention program. And another player in our prevention program, besides me being coordinator, is Will Windham, who is our BIPP coordinator. And we'll talk briefly about what BIPP is. But of course, BIPP being a man and two men on a prevention program on an agency, I kind of thought it might be interesting just to kind of talk about the role that men can play in preventing domestic violence in our community. So, Will, you're such a sport as always. Thanks for doing this.
Yes, Good Friday morning.
I kind of called an audible on Will a couple of days ago. Hey, man, what do you think about us doing this? And of course, Will and I, we're coming to you from the confines of our brand new production facilities here in Lufkin, and Will and I are now based in here. So we have a nice conference room to do this kind of thing in, and so we're just going to talk a little bit about the role that men play. So, Will, before we do get started, just briefly, you are the BIPP coordinator. What is the BIPP? What is BIPP, and what do you do in regards to that?
Yeah, so I guess the way I found myself to this work and this conversation is the Family Crisis Center here started a BIPP program, and of course I came on at the inception of that.
How long ago? When was that?
I think that was 2015 I started
Okay.
here, and we just put it together from the ground up. But of course, BIPP, Batterers Intervention and Prevention Program, is geared solely, our program here is geared solely towards men who have been perpetrators. Again, normally those guys come from probation, parole, court systems, CPS, etc. And, of course, the main goal of that is just accountability for men.
Right. And, again, I think it's kind of a unique perspective. You know, when we go to conferences, I mean, back when there were in-person conferences, I guess I should say, especially with prevention, there's men in prevention work, but there's really not just a ton. And I think it's kind of interesting when you see the main players that have been in the prevention program the past couple of years have been me and you, and being both men in this work. And I don't know if sometimes when we go do a presentation or go talk to people, if they find it kind of odd that there's men talking about domestic violence prevention. But I kind of want to, and whenever I was talking to Will, I kind of wanted this just to be kind of a conversation, because instead of just a Q&A back and forth. And I kind of want to talk about, is there a place for men to stand up to domestic violence? Or are men's voices being heard? Do men's voices need to be heard in the domestic violence prevention? And so I don't know if you want to kick it off, or I can kick it off. I personally think that it's good to hear from a man's perspective and to hear men. I don't know if I want to go as far as say, hear men be feminists, but to hear men be advocates for women and men, because and we will talk about this. Men can be victims of domestic violence also. It's not just women who are survivors of domestic violence, but I think there's a place for men. I think it is good to hear and see men address the issue and to talk to the community about this and the need to address it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just back to your point, us being in prevention and sort of getting the side eye would be sort of like, I guess, if you go to the hospital and you show up and the nurse is a male, right? I mean, certainly I've seen more of that, but it's just not quite what you're expecting. And I think it goes back to the things that we talk about so much in prevention. And of course, it's become a hot topic and almost, debatable whether we can speak up about it, but it's the gender socialization of men and women. And of course, it really just goes back to that. And again, in the BIPP world, of course, the key missing to solving the issues with domestic violence really is the men in the conversation. So a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of things we see, lots of good women do lots of really great work to help other women in dealing with domestic violence and offering the services, supporting them. But really, when that conversation is missing something, and that's the men. And again, in the conversation around domestic violence, so quickly the perpetrator or the male falls out of the conversation. So, when Janie, as I like to say, comes to the Family Crisis Center, we might ask the perpetrator's name and what he did, but outside of that, we're really not concerned if he has anything else going on. Is he mentally okay? Does he have substance abuse issues? What's making him so angry, right? Yeah. So, yes, the place to stand up, I think, really is like you were saying, just all men being accountable to those ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I always wonder about, and I don't think I've ever really had this happen, is, we always expect, and we're always told to expect, when we go out and make a presentation, there may be an outcry. And it just makes me wonder, are there possible outcries that aren't presented because they don't want to outcry to a man, or if they feel uncomfortable talking to a man about something that's going on in their life? I don't know. That it's crossed my mind, and it may not. Most women may not find that intimidating. I just always have kind of speculated about that.
Yeah, I think anecdotally, yes. And before I had enough BIPP work going at the crisis center, I did a little advocacy on the legal side, and you just feel the tension that comes in a room when a woman comes in to explain what a male has just done, and there's a male sitting across there. Right. It doesn't mean that they won't do it. It doesn't mean that it's totally uncomfortable. But yes, I think especially when the places we go to present prevention information, the risk is so high for the woman to report anyway. Mm-hmm. The last person they're going to come to is me or you standing at the front of the room. Sure.
Right. One of the talking points I was going to address is, what can men do? And the first thing that always crosses my mind is the bystander intervention concept. If you're out with your buddies and your buddies are bragging, lately the term has been locker room talk, but that, or doing something inappropriate as the waitress walks by or whatever, and they slap her on the butt or something. Let's just say, guys, speak up and say something. Tell your guys, hey, that really wasn't a cool thing you just did. Why did you do that? If you see someone that's obviously very uncomfortable, if you're out at a restaurant, and at the bar you see a man hitting on a woman, she's visibly uncomfortable. Don't go over there and start trying to kick his ass, but say something or pretend you know her, and get her away from that. I mean, it's simple things like that, I think, that men can do. I don't think you necessarily have to pick a platform and get on a stage and start a protest or anything.
Yeah, and I think just speaking to that, while we don't see enough of that, because I think what we see through BIPP group and just working with men is that it's such a risk to men to stick their neck out in those situations, because it really even if you individually believe that the guy should slap the waiter on the backside as she walks by, when you're with your 5 other guy friends, you're really risking a lot of your social capital to call them out, right? And not that it's the right or wrong thing to do. It's just that you risk being judged.
Sure.
And that's really
exactly.
I think that's really what makes this whole conversation, gives it some credence, is because it's so hard for men to speak up because they're still concerned they'll be essentially what we know from BIPP group is be referred to as feminine in some way, right? As weak, as not as good as another man, not as manly, and this whole idea again again a bit we think that men believe that if you begin to talk to them about what it means to be a man, you're essentially trying to turn them into a woman,
right? Which
is just not the case, but that's sort of the belief.
Well, and even when you talk about prevention work, and one of the main pillars of prevention work that I talk to students about, or even adults, is the positive gender roles. And especially when you start trying to tell men, hey, it's okay to express your feelings. It's okay to cry. It's okay to like Downton Abbey or whatever. That doesn't take away anything of your masculinity. But when you try to address that to men and I'll go ahead and say it, in Deep East Texas, a lot of times, it's like you said, as a presenter and as a professional, it may not come back on you as strong. Sometimes you do get the blowback, well, you're trying to change us. But if you're out with your buddies, that's a whole other level of your standing, like you said, in that group. Okay, and I think maybe sometimes that may keep men from saying something because they don't want to come across as feminine or weak or not liking women, or whatever. And so that is a very good point. But guys, I mean, the thing is, just don't be afraid. Instead of thinking of, well, I'm a man defending a woman, you're a human defending another human, and that's the main thing I think we need to look at it as.
Yeah, and I think that that's what gets glossed over in all of these conversations is that it's not really healthy for a man to be participating in that type of behavior. It's not really healthy for him. It's certainly not good for the waitress who, he's putting on that stage like that.
Right.
But yeah, it's not that we're trying to make you weak. We're just trying to make you a better human being, right? I mean, understand why that's inappropriate in a public setting to act like that towards a woman. But it comes from... and these just general ideas. It's not that, again, Johnny is a terrible guy sitting at the table and he just likes to be a womanizer, as we would say. It comes from these beliefs about what he should be, not necessarily personal to what's going on. I guess it starts way back at the very top of the pyramid that just Johnny just believes it's his right to have access to that woman because he's a man.
Right. Sure. So really, guys, just it's not just a women's issue. It's not just, well, it only happens to women, or the women need to take care of the women. As men, we do need to stand up and speak out and say something. And I'll mention this because I love this, and I'll use this in my trainings a lot. The actor Justin Baldoni, you can look on Facebook. What is it called? I think it's Why I'm Tired Being Man Enough, I think is the name of the video. But he gives such an excellent TED Talk about men's roles in embracing what has traditionally been considered feminine, and that it's not demasculizing, is that a word, to do things like that, and how we do need to defend the women in our lives and in our community when it comes to domestic violence and sexual assault and things like that. So look it up. Just go on YouTube. It's Justin Baldoni. Why I'm tired, or why I'm done being man enough. And he's an actor, but it is a very good TED Talk. And I kind of want to close things out. We did mention this at the top of the show that remember men are victims too at the Family Crisis Center. And that's one of the reasons we kind of changed our name. We were the Women's Shelter of East Texas. But we want to emphasize the fact that we do serve men, and men can be victims also. We've had men stay at our shelter before. So I think it's, and I don't know if you want to add anything to this, Will, but it is important for men to speak up. If you look at statistics, and it does make sense, obviously, men, reports of men victims are going to be lower than women. But I think part of that is because men are afraid. If something happens, they are afraid to speak up and report and to say something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see this in our groups from time to time. I think there's no denying that there are women perpetrators of domestic violence and that there are male victims of domestic violence. But the same sort of barriers that we talked about that keep men from calling out other men on their bad behavior is the same barriers that keep guys from reporting, right? I mean, if you show up at the police station and you're like, hey, my wife just beat me down in the front yard, and the other police officer is male, what is the sort of social ramifications of that, right? And of course, if you're real adherent to this idea of this man box, we talk about you're real manly, well, you can't go just run around in the community admitting that your wife's beating you up, because what are other men how are they going to judge you, right? So, and really we see this story all the time where men come into BIPP and they excuse their bad behavior away by saying that she's the violent one. Well, we have simply one answer for you, and that's, did you call the cops? Right? And most of them will say no, they don't need to call the cops. They're bigger than, they had the situation under control. Clearly they didn't. But yes, what leg do you have to stand on if you're just running around saying your partner is beating you up? You're going to have to do the same thing as a victim that's a woman would have to do. You're going to have to call, you're going to have to make a report. If you want to access services or you want a protective order, there's going to have to be some sufficient evidence showing that person, that Janie's so crazy as you say she is. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. You can't show up and say I'm a victim, and when they ask, well, where's the evidence of that? And there's none. Then it's just a he said she said situation.
Right. All right. I think that's kind of going to wrap it up for this session of the podcast. I did want to kind of address that because a lot of times, and I'm sure we have talked about this before, but we really have never just talked about the role that men need to play in prevention. And I think it has a lot to do with our standing in society, the gender roles thing, what the media tells us, how sometimes men don't want to stand up and speak out and be advocates for women. But we really need to do that. Will, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. It's good. They can't hear you nod.
Yeah, I think
I'm sorry.
my only challenge is the place for men starts at home in the mirror, right? And what you believe about yourself, about men, about your role with your partner or with women, or what you believe about women. And it's only when you believe that there's some equality there that you can go out into public and start addressing it with other people, because, and that just starts in the mirror. Where do you stand? You have to, as we say in BIPP, you have to do the work for yourself of asking yourself the questions, what you believe about your relationship to women. Where's the equality there? Where does the power and control, which are our two main things to always talk about, where are you with those? And once you address that with yourself, then you can take it out into public.
Sure. All right. Again, Will Windham, he's our BIPP coordinator, and we're talking about men's roles, I should say, in preventing domestic violence. Again, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And if you feel like you're listening and you need the services of the Family Crisis Center, we do have a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week hotline. That number is 1-800-828-7233, 1-800-828-7233. And I encourage you to subscribe to Conversations and Connections. You can do that through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, pretty much any podcast service of your choice, wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you do a search for Conversations and Connections, you should be able to find us. And remember, be that voice, if not for you, for someone else.